Well, welcome to New Covenant United Methodist Church. My name is Tinker. I'm glad you could join us today.
Our reading for today is from Luke 13:31 to 35. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" The word of the God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
I guess it's dead. Yep, it's dead.
It died.
The only problem with those is when they die, and that's it. There's no warning, no nothing. All right, well, our text today that Grace just read for us, I want to explain it first, talk about it a little bit in its context, and then we can talk about how we would apply it to our lives. So this is Jesus now heading towards the final week of his life. He is now heading towards Jerusalem. That is his goal, to get to Jerusalem, to finish all that he came to accomplish. And as he's getting ready and he's on this mission, I almost envision him accelerating his ministry. You know, one of the texts that Bill read for us last week talked about his compassion, that Jesus had compassion on the people. A couple of times Jesus would go to do something, but he had compassion on the people, and he would stop what he was doing and help the people. And so I can just see his compassion as he's thinking about this last week of his life, causing him to do a lot more ministry. Teach as many people as he can. Heal as many people as he can. Pray. I can see him sleeping less. So he's very focused on getting to Jerusalem. But then some Pharisees come along and say to him, "You don't want to go to Jerusalem. Herod is out to kill you. You need to change your plans. You need to stop what you're doing." Now, we always think of the Pharisees as bad guys, right? So there are some that say that's true, and they're just wanting to see him squirm. But remember, we can't label people all one thing. Not all Pharisees were bad people. So these may be truly Pharisees that followed his ministry, that cared for him. And so they believe he is part of what God's doing. And so they really are warning him to save him. But how does Jesus respond? "You go tell that fox, I have things to do." Now, what do we think of when we hear the word fox? Sly, clever. That is not the meaning it had then. A fox was considered an insignificant animal. So what is he saying about the ruler of that time? He's insignificant. He doesn't matter. His ministry is what matters, and that's how he responds. He says, "Listen, I'm casting out demons and performing cures. I'm healing people. I'm taking care of people. That's what matters. That's the most important thing to do. That's my priority." And then he adds to that, actually, that he has today, tomorrow, and on the third day, I finish my work. Now, what's he alluding to? Yeah, the cross. He's alluding to the cross. But he's a good week out, but he is still saying, I have things to do until it's done. That is my goal. That's my mission. That's my calling. And I'm not going to let the threat of death stop me. Now, I have to tell y'all, that would stop me. It would certainly make me think twice. If I was heading somewhere and someone said, if you keep going down that road, you're going to die, I would be like, well, I'm looking for a U-turn. Yeah, or Taco Bell. I mean, whatever comes first. Right? Taco Bell. So he is on this mission. He has this goal set for his life. And then he goes on and he starts talking about Jerusalem. And he says, because it's impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Is he exaggerating just a little bit? Yeah, because the prophets were killed all over the place. 6 prophets were killed in Jerusalem. But there was a lot of them that were killed outside of Jerusalem. Now, the order may have come from Jerusalem, but they were certainly killed in other places. But what he's saying, in essence, is, and he finishes this out with his thought, when he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And this is a lament, by the way. If you're not familiar with laments, laments are kind of like a prose, a poetic prose, that's kind of a mourning. So he's mourning Jerusalem. He says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stone those who are sent to it. Do you remember where the temple is? It's in Jerusalem. So where do the people go to worship? Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the center of their lives when it comes to worship and worshiping God. Kind of like, I guess, in a way you can say the church has become, our local church has become kind of the center for us. And so this is the center of worship. So where do you think prophets would most be held in honor? In the temple. But they're not. They're not. Unfortunately, when the prophets come and speak the word of truth, they speak the word of God, we don't always want to hear it. And the people didn't want to hear it, and the kings didn't want to hear it. So Jesus is weeping over the fact that the very place where they worship God is the very place where they don't want to hear God's message. And then he goes on to say that I desire to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. Have any of you ever worked with chickens? Hens in particular? We used to have chickens. Loved fresh eggs. Best thing in the world, fresh eggs. But we had hens that would come what we call broody, and they would lay an egg, and we'd go in the next morning to get the egg, and they were still sitting on the egg, and they would turn into what we called henzillas.
Oh, yeah.
They were henzillas. And you couldn't get the egg out from under them without losing a little bit of skin and bleeding. And there's nothing that hurts worse than having a chicken grab the skin on the top of your hand and twist it. It really hurts, and that's what they do. Now I have to tell you, we selectively bred out all of the henzillas because it was just so hard to deal with. But hens are super protective of not only their eggs, but their chicks. I actually watched a video where this hen took on a king cobra to protect her chicks. And her chicks were actually cornered in this back corner, and this poor snake wasn't really even going after the chickens. It was just going through, and it went down towards the chicks, and the hen got every single one of the chicks out. And it had to keep going back and back and back, and the snake is striking at it the whole time. And that hen kept her own, and she got all of her chicks out. So, true henzillas. I mean, it's a real thing. But they do more than that. They teach their chicks. They protect them. Boy, when it rains, you watch a hen put her wing out, and all those chicks will get up under her wing. She'll watch over it, protect it. And that's what Jesus says he wants to be for us. That's what he wants to do for all of us, is teach us, protect us, watch over us, defend us. But he then goes on to say, you are not willing. Jesus isn't the problem. It's us. We are not always willing. So when I read this passage, what I see in this passage is that Jesus has this goal, this ministry, this calling, this purpose in his life, And it is so important, and he recognizes the importance of it, that nothing else matters. And we're in the Lenten season. We've been talking about Lent. We've been talking about drawing closer to God. Talking about how important it is. At Lent, I gave a message talking about it's worth it. It's worth it to do all that we can to draw as close to God as we can. And Jesus is doing all he can to complete the mission that God's given him. He's on his own spiritual journey. And he's so focused on it that even the threat of death is insignificant to him. So, I think about our own spiritual journeys. They're worth it. So let's talk about how do we accomplish it. First, let's talk about setting some goals. If we're on a spiritual journey, we need to have some goals. And it's easy to say, well, my goal is I'm going to draw closer to God. Is that really a goal?
Can be.
It can be, but it's really more a wish, isn't it? Yeah, I'd like to be closer to God. Unless I have a plan what that looks like, it really is just a wish. Think about it when you go to drive somewhere. Let's say I decide I want to go to New York. Do I just get in the car and head east? I probably could follow the signs. But even when we go to Albuquerque, we plan for it, don't we? We go fill up our tank. Of course, we don't need a map anymore to get to Albuquerque, but if I was going to go somewhere different, I would get out a map or my GPS. I still like paper maps, but I do use the GPS. But I might check my tires if I was going on a long trip, make sure they're good. Might put some snacks in the car. We do all this planning for something that really isn't that significant compared to our spiritual journey. Our spiritual journey is so significant, we need a really good plan. We need to set some goals. Just saying I want to be closer to God is just like heading east. It really isn't a plan. I might get somewhere, but it's not really putting a plan together to truly draw closer to God. And everyone sets goals different. I provided this just in case somebody got something out of it. It's called SMART goals. I use a variation of it. I've used lots of different things. I make a to-do list. I've made action plans where I list what I want to do step by step. But SMART goals is kind of helpful because it's an acronym. You can kind of keep it in mind. And each letter stands for something. And the S stands for specific. I make specific goals. What do I actually want to do? If I say I want to draw closer to God, am I being specific? It's kind of vague. How do I want to draw closer to God? Maybe I want to, maybe prayer life is what draws, and it is for me, my prayer life is what draws me closer to God. So I might set a specific goal that I want to spend more time in prayer. Or perhaps I've run into, and this has happened in my life multiple times, where all my usual spiritual disciplines just dry up and they don't do anything for me. So my goal might be, my first specific thing that I might do is I'm going to do a little bit of research and talk to some people about some of their spiritual disciplines and what helps them and try something new. So that's what's specific, the S, being specific. I'm going to set a specific goal, I'm not going to make it vague. The N is measurable. This may or may not be relevant, but let's say I recognize in my own life I don't pray, so I might set a goal that I'm going to pray for at least 5 minutes every day. Well, that's something I can measure whether I've done it or not. So I know whether I'm accomplishing my goal because I can actually measure whether I've been doing it or not. So M for measurable. The A is for attainable. All right, I'm currently going to school, working. If I said I'm going to read the Bible through once a month, is that realistic? No. No, I'm lucky to get through it in 18 months. That's usually, I set a year as a goal, but I usually end up at 18 months. So it has to be an attainable goal. So A is for attainable. R is for relevant. If I said that I am going to give up chocolate so that I can draw closer to God, is that really relevant? Might be, but probably not. Actually, that one wouldn't be attainable either, would it? So it is not really relevant. Like if I said, I'm going to quit writing in cursive for the next month, how in the world is that going to draw me closer to God? It's not. So it has to be relevant to Taco Bell, that's not attainable. So, have I been to Taco Bell since Lent? Yeah, I have. That's the next year. Y'all remind me, next year. We'll put Taco Bell on there. All right, the last one's timely. When do you want to do it? Set a goal for when you want to do it. And I don't use this quite like it's written. This is written really more for business goals. When I think of timely, I think, is it on my calendar? Because it's not going to happen if it's not on my calendar. So that's how I use SMART goals. And I see Jesus in this. He has set a goal. He is heading for Jerusalem, and everything else falls away. But he knows exactly what he wants to do. And if we want to draw closer to God, we need to know what the plan is. How are we going to do that? How are we going to draw closer to him? The other way, how else can I reach my spiritual goals, our spiritual goals, is we have to commit to it. We have to commit. It has to be a priority. And priorities, by the way, are up and down. When we commit to something, we might remember it for a little bit, and then we're going to fall off a little bit. But get back in there. Get back in. And just stay committed to it. Committed doesn't mean that you're going to remember to do it every day. It just means that when you realize you forgot, that you recommit. You get back in there. But when we think about commitment, there are so many things, right, that come in the way of reaching our spiritual goals. I mean, that list could go on and on. And actually, I found this on the internet, because if that had been mine, probably the biggest one would be discipline. That's the thing I struggle with, reaching my spiritual goals. That's why my phone has reminders on it. That's why my calendar has reminders on it, because I struggle with discipline. And if it's in my face, and actually if I draw a box in front of it for a little check mark, it gets me every time. So if you ever need me to do something for you, write it down and put a little box in front of it, because that's what works for me. But we all need to find what works for us to help us stay committed to reaching our goals. And some of that may be recognizing what's keeping me from reaching my goals. You may want to make your own list. What is currently keeping me? And Jesus, his big one up there was death. That's what was put in front of him. Jesus, you've got this goal of getting to Jerusalem. And he even said, but death's not going to stop me. He was so committed to his goal and doing what he wanted to do that he said nothing, absolutely nothing will stop me. All right, and then the last thing is know that Jesus is with us. Jesus says that he is there, like Henzilla, to teach us, to protect us, to watch over us. And who's the one leaving? Us. Reminds me of this video. This is a shepherd who they have a trench beside the road, putting in a pipeline, and the sheep has fallen into it, and the sheep gets stuck, and they're trying to get it out. And here's what happens. And we're the sheep, by the way. It doesn't have any sound. You ever felt that way? I think that's the way God feels, like that shepherd. But here's the thing, is God's willing to just keep going in and pulling us out of the trench over and over and over again, as many times as it takes. We are the ones that walk away. But Jesus is saying that he loves us so much, he'll do whatever it takes to protect us, to watch over us, to keep taking us out of that trench. So despite the fact that Jesus is heading to the city that he knows he'll die, despite the fact that there are threats for his life, he keeps heading that way. Despite the fact that Jerusalem is the place where worship should be the number one thing that's happening, and yet it's the very people that are rejecting God, he still loved and still headed straight to Jerusalem. It was the most significant thing in his life was his love for us. And it drove him, and it guided him, and it was the goals he set his life around. Our relationship with God should also be the most important thing in our lives. And it should drive us and focus us and make everything else in our life insignificant. So just remember, as you're going through Lent and you're thinking about what you want to do to draw closer to God, it's worth it. But you're not alone, and you're loved. Amen.